Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Wabi Sabi channel. Hope you're doing really well. How are you today, Coach Jamie?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm really well today, and I'm excited to talk about a topic that I think will bring a lot of practical value to our audience, and it is the sleep window.
I like the enthusiasm. Yes.
Let's do this. All
All
right,
right.
so actually, let's start with this. Like, when you hear this term "sleep window," like how would you just describe a sleep window to somebody who's never heard of this before?
I think, most people would call it a sleep schedule or um, sleep routine, right? So something that kind of gives a guidance of like structure on in terms of sleep. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Something that creates some structure around like sleep, but you know without that intent, like with some often we hear like, oh, you should do this for your bedtime routine or this, which can be a little tricky because it's like, okay, that it can appear that we're trying to control sleep or make sleep happen magically, which is not what the idea is. So I wrote it like this: a sleep window is to create some routine and structure without the intent to control. And I just want to emphasize that for everyone who's heard of sleep windows in the context of traditional CBTI, where it's very much taught as like, oh, you need to like keep yourself awake really, really late so you have a strong sleep drive, and that makes you sleep, which is a little tricky. A lot of pressure that can create some anxiety. So anyway, sleep in a structure without intent to control is how I think of it. Now, spinning off of that, what are the benefits from having some structure from a gas perspective? And before I let you comment on this, for anyone that's new here, if you're like, what is gas perspective? Check out our video on the gas and brake model. So with that said, what are some benefits from a gas perspective?
Right. So as we talked about in our last episode, talking about the gas and brake model, two things need to happen, right? You need to be sleepy enough when you go to bed. And so when you try to stick to a sleep window, then you're kind of ensuring that your sleep drive is high enough that you're able to fall asleep easily when you do decide to go to bed. So that from a gas perspective, I think trying to stick to like a very reasonable sleep window will ensure that you have enough sleep drive when you go
Exactly
to the
right. And
bedroom. Yeah.
And just to point out that, of course, like this applies to adults and children. So anyone hearing this, like the benefit from a gas perspective is to make sure like your child in this case is sleepy enough that they reasonably that we can reasonably expect them to actually sleep. So that's the benefit from a gas perspective. It's some structure, but I'd say there's some benefits from a break perspective too with this. How do you see this?
I think, as parents, we try our best to, we know that from our kids thrive in some sort of structure routine. And so knowing that, at least I can talk from a parent perspective in that that kind of dials down my stress around, mealtime or as we are talking about now, bedtime. And so knowing that, okay, I did my best, I tried to stick to the routine, and now I just let it play out. And so not to stress about it, or like you say, try to control it, because that can increase your stress and therefore increase that break, which prevents you from falling asleep. And so that by knowing that you just try your best to keep within a reasonable sleep window, that kind of dials down the stress.
Yeah, stress, uncertainty,
Hmm.
ambiguity, like,
Yeah.
oh, I tried this. We tried to put him to bed this time. It didn't work. We tried this time. We tried this. No, that creates stress and anxiety. So if you have like a structure, a pro, you've decided what your routine is going to be. You just kind of stick to it. It can actually take away a lot of anxiety
Hmm.
for you as a parent, and the child that senses that, and their anxiety is lower as well. So it can help in both ways. So with that said, anyone who's listening here may be like, so how do I do? What do I do to create this sleep window? And I like to put it this way: that there are three questions that I like to ask anyone who wants to create a sleep window. And the first one is quite easy. It's like, what is a suitable rise time for your child? And I say not a wake up time, because we don't know exactly when anybody's going to wake up, but a rise time, which is basically like when we like to start our day. And so what is that? What is a suitable rise time for you? That's the first thing to ask yourself, or suitable rise time for your child rather. And then B is like, how much do you think your child needs to sleep? And sometimes this is, sometimes you automatically have an idea like, oh yeah, I think my kid needs to sleep like 10 hours or 9 hours, something like
Right.
that.
And then you can find online some what we call normative values, right? So where, and we can give them some ballpark numbers. But then I'm sure you're going to highlight later on that sleep is highly individual. And so you can, for for toddlers or preschoolers, they typically need anything between 11 to 12 hours, and then school age kids maybe 9 to 10 hours, and then teenagers 8 hours to 9 hours. But as you always emphasize, sleep is highly individual. It doesn't mean that if your neighbor's kid is getting, you know, 9 hours of sleep, that automatically applies to your own child. And so I think, so how do you answer this question is if your kid is, you know, going through his or her day without any issues, no signs of somnolence or sleepiness, right? So most likely that they're getting enough hours of sleep. And then you
Yeah,
can, yeah.
no, exactly. Well said. And I would say, in addition to what we just talked about, which is like maybe you have like a sense of how much your child needs to sleep, uh, or maybe maybe you don't, and then you can kind of use
Maybe
this
you
like
don't, yeah.
have
So
some
you can
ballpark or start
check, you
somewhere.
can do some math, yeah, and see, oh, okay, so she's getting about, I mean, yeah, she's getting about 8 hours, and then yeah, and then she seems active and playful and going to school with no issues, nah, and the teacher's not calling you saying, oh, he's napping
Yeah.
during recess. So those are good signs. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, and we will definitely at some point comment on like what how much should a child sleep, and as you point out, it's very very individual. Okay, so
Mhm.
we talked about B though, and C is like how much of quiet time would you like in the evening, meaning kind of like how much time would you maybe spend with your child, like reading to them in bed if you do that, or how much time would you like them to have to sort of do something nice and relaxing before they actually go to bed, right?
And is this part of like what you call leading up to the bedroom, or is this when you are? Yeah, just for everyone's, for not to confuse anyone, is this is the
Yeah,
time that you are in bed, right? And that you expect them to fall asleep from the time you say this is quiet time. Is that what you mean?
I think of this as more like the sort of a cue that, okay, this is when we start
Bedtime.
sort of
Yeah.
start at bedtime, but not
Mhm.
necessarily like you have to be in bed,
Be
but
sleep.
this is
Yeah.
the time sort of leading up to going to bed or being in bed. But this is kind of like this is when the night starts, something
Okay.
something of
Right.
that
So
nature. Does that
something
make
like
sense?
that. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah.
And we
All
can
right.
comment on that as we continue here with our example. So let's say somebody said, okay, I think my child really they need to be up by 7. That's the rise time, and I think they need to sleep about 9 hours. And I would like about 45 minutes of like quiet time, wind down time, something like that. Then what happens then is the sleep window becomes the following. So rise time is 7. So that's pretty easy, right? So we'll just our routine becomes we get up at 7. Bedtime becomes around 9:15, something like that, which is going 9 hours before 7, because that's like we think they need about 9 hours to sleep, right? And then we
Mhm.
land at 10 p.m. And then we take away 45 minutes from that, which leads us to 9:15, right? So then we have our sleep window, which is like the idea here becomes then if this, let's say you answered it exactly like this, then the idea would be like, okay, you wake up your kid at 7, and you sort of start, either you can have them go to bed and read or draw or something in their bed, or they can do something else relaxing at 9:15, and then you can expect that
Them
probably around 10 they may
to
sleep.
fall
But this is the whole
asleep.
idea.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, this is great. And that actually manages your expectation as a parent, where um, the problem is, so some people wake up their kids at 7 a.m., but expect them to feel sleepy at 8. So then here's the problem there. If you can imagine, if you won't expect them to feel sleepy or fall asleep at 10, they're tossing and turning in bed for 2 hours, right? And so they get frustrated, you get frustrated, and then that break or the hyperarousal gets, um, it gets elevated, and so then it becomes a problem. And so, sticking to a window and knowing what to expect is very, very helpful, I think.
Absolutely, totally agree. And now I had two kind of like follow-up questions that are common here, which is, what if they nap? What if they nap? And you can comment more on this, but I simply said it's not that complicated actually. We just simply have to subtract that from like the total sleep need. We said that they needed nine. We thought they needed 9 hours of sleep. Well, if one of those hours happen during the day, then we can take away one, and we expect them to sleep less at night, of course. And if your child is older and you realize like, oh, they're napping for like 2.5 hours, well, that may be an invitation to maybe cut down on that a little bit. But any other comments on naps?
No, I think, like you mentioned, it's just really a matter of math. So, and again, it knowing that if they nap, you wouldn't expect them to necessarily fall asleep at their usual bedtime, and that takes away that mystery, and so that doesn't again add to the hyperarousal or the stress around
Yeah,
bedtime. Yeah.
very, very well. And then finally is like, when you hear about this sleep window, a follow question can be like, how strict should we be? Like, how about the weekend? How about if we're traveling? How about, other circumstances? Maybe they're having a sleepover. I don't know. How strict should one be? What do you think?
Um, again, I think you already kind of alluded to the answer early on, where it affords structure, but you want to be careful it's not controlling how you live, right? So we try to get enough sleep, because the idea is when we're refreshed during the day, we can live our lives as how we want it. And so that, be careful not in that the sleep window is not dictating how you live your life day to day and even on the weekends. So we know life happens. uh, you need to travel, you need to you visit family out of town, and you might get home late. So if any of those things happen, um, again, uh, just we practice some self-compassion, saying we did our best, but this is what's happening now. And then know that it all resets as soon as you go back to your usual routine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's sort of like common sense. Like, this whole sleep window is just again to afford some structure, some routine. But it's like if your kid sleeps in like 35 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour in the weekend, even, it's fine. If they happen to go bed a little later, like, it's fine. But have this kind of as a ballpark. So I said just use common sense. I like to say, I like the word fuzzy, like keep things
I know.
a little
I
fuzzy.
think I like keep things flexible. We like I, in a it's sometimes in clinic, I like to give that analogy of a play-doh, where it has some structure, but it's quite malleable, and so that there's some structure, but you can change based off of what's going on in your life day to
Yeah,
day. Yeah.
I love that one. I love that one too. The Play-Doh analogy. It's a very nice
It's
one,
it's nice for kids.
right?
I don't know what you use for your adult clients.
Um, yeah, I think adults like
Oh
Play-Doh too.
yeah, I
Maybe I'll
like
start using
Play-Doh
it. But
too. Right.
anyways, I want to say, yeah, love to hear some comments. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, please post them in the comment section. And other than that, we will be back with more next week.
All right. This was
Right?
fun. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Bye
See
now.
you next time. Bye bye.